Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bankroll Burners, the podcast for poker players who can't stop getting it in bad. I'm Mike,
And I'm Josh.
and once again, we are here. We are bad at poker, and we're going to go through some hands that we've played in recent weeks and talk about how we maybe could have played them a little better.
Yeah, some fun developments outside of the actual hands. As you can see, we've added some visual aids because we recognize that no matter how many times we recite the board and suits of the cards, it's not altogether that helpful compared to actually being able to see it. So, thank you for your feedback, and here it is.
And I have a prediction, given our historical technical prowess with such things, is that my prediction would be that this will go extremely poorly. So let's see. Maybe we'll get it right next week, or maybe, just maybe, we'll get it in good this week.
I doubt it. Well, anyway, how was your week poker wise?
It was good. It was good. A couple buddies were in town, so we goofed off and played a fun 2-2 session with some pretty wacky characters at the table.
Awesome.
So that was a good time.
Awesome. I got a few sessions in. The first one was at Encore Boston as usual, where I got the first time experience of playing with a organic Bankroll Burners viewer. Shout out to Dustin, who also plays in the Northeast. Thanks for listening to us. I hope you enjoy the episode.
You're the best, Dustin.
And then I had a trip to Philly this weekend where I played a couple sessions at the Rivers Casino in Philly. Which was a fantastic experience. It was like the people, were much less knowledgeable about the game and strategic, let's say, compared to the folks I run into at Encore. It almost makes me think that I should be making more trips, as Dustin suggested, by the way, farther afield from Encore, back up to the New Hampshire poker rooms where I started. To borrow a Bart Hansen phrase, where I cut my teeth.
I will say, I've only played in New Hampshire. The only room I've played in is Boston Billiards Club and Casino, and I did find it to be a fairly soft room. That was my experience.
And I think even that I could probably if I went there, I'd probably plan on playing, maybe taking a shot at 2-5, given that it probably is a slightly softer crowd, and so that would be a good time to move up in try to move up in stakes and make take shots above my normal game. So maybe that's on the horizon. That'll be fun.
Sweet.
But yeah, with all that out of the way, why don't we hop into hands? I know you got one.
I do have an interesting hand. This is actually from an online session, in our online home game that I played a couple weeks back. And this was from a 1-2 game, which
Wow.
1-2 in those rooms that's a big game. Typically, I mean, most people are buying in those games for 200 big blinds deep at minimum. Many people will buy for 300 or even 500 big blinds deep. It's not that atypical for people to see that at the table. I always buy into those games for $400. That's kind of my standard buy-in. And this was a 9-handed. This was full ring. The host graciously blocked off the 10th seat, which we always appreciate.
Love that.
Poker is miserable. And this is a hand played against. I guess a bit of background on the villain in this hand. He'd been 3-betting a lot, which is something we see a lot in those rooms. I don't know. I think you could agree, Josh. Like, people love playing 3-bets in those games.
Yeah, I've seen people 3-bet with like basically any two suited cards at times.
Yeah, that's right. That's completely accurate. So I will say, I don't think this villain was like crazy and wild. I mean, we do see a lot of wild play in those rooms, but this villain didn't seem nuts. But he was definitely 3-betting more than his share of hands. So that's a little bit of background out of the way. We have a limp in this hand. We have a. I'm sorry. One sec. I'm having a bit of technical difficulty on my end.
Already, we haven't even gotten to the hand yet, and we're running into technical difficulty. That just proves Mike's point.
Yeah, I apologize. So, okay, we're good. I got to back up. We have a limp in this hand from the under the gun position, and we are at 340 effective right now. I'm the effective stack. I'm going to limp. It folds all the way to me on the button, where I make it $8 with snowmen. 8 of hearts, 8 of spades.
8 of hearts, 8 of spades.
Oh, look at that. That's nice. So a standard open in this game is either 4 or 6 or 5. People use all those different sizings. I decided to go with the 6 plus limp, given the under the gun limp. And small blind then makes it 34. And under the gun limper folds, it gets back to me.
Okay, well, I think we're just about priced in to.
Yeah, I don't really think we can fold.
Make the call here. It is a little big, but I mean there is the limper as well. That's a consideration. So, 34 over your raise of 8. We're in position. We've got a good hand. I'm happy to call and see some cards.
Yeah, it's worth noting we don't have the implied odds to flop a set. Typically, you're looking at wanting about 15 to 1. I'm getting more like 10 to 1 implied odds. So there is that, but I do think 8s can just be the best hand enough times that this is just a fine call. So
yep.
The flop is a pretty interesting one. We have 6 of clubs, 5 of clubs, 2 of diamonds.
So 7 of clubs, 5 of clubs, and deuce of diamonds.
6 of clubs, 5 of clubs, deuce of diamonds.
All right. So we flop an overpair.
Yes, we do. We flop a weird overpair.
Quite difficult to do.
Yeah. And I think that, I think this is pretty good. Obviously, we're in deep trouble versus 10s plus. But I think I'm pretty happy with this flop. Obviously, I'm still ahead of ace, king, ace, queen. So.
We're not that deep, so we're only in trouble, I'd say.
Yeah, right. Fair enough. Thank you for that. And the villain goes ahead and continues here as I would mostly expect, given that there's not the nuts here is pocket 6s, which I guess there's 4-3, but come on, none of us has 4-3, so.
But it's suited.
Yeah, it's true. I don't really think either of us is gonna have pocket 6s here that often. I might have it more than him, so I think I would expect him to continue here, and he does for $24. And I of course am gonna call here. I would even call if he made a significantly larger bet, which I think a lot of players might do on a flop like this. But yeah, I think I have to call.
I think it's a straightforward call. I don't think there's any real reason to raise in a situation like this. We do have better hands to raise. We're obviously still behind a decent portion of this range as well. So, I'm happy to just call on these low boards.
Is there some kind of justification for maybe making a small thin value raise to get value from maybe ace king, maybe ace queen? I don't know, some kind of hand that has some equity against us, but might continue, particularly ace king or ace queen with a club, with maybe ace of clubs.
It's possible. I think that the issue that you might run into is that it's a very telegraphed value range. I think. I think, if you raise here, it's really, as you said, you really shouldn't have 6s, 5s, or deuces particularly often. So your value hands are really 7s through 10s, probably the hands that you're not 4-betting. With keeping in mind, too, that your 4-bet range is probably significantly wider, given that it's a button versus blind situation.
Sure. Yeah, true. So maybe there's just not that many hands. I'm thin value raising here. So it's my hand is maybe a little face up if I do it. Yeah. That being said, excuse me. I mean, if he folds ace king and ace queen here, I'm not particularly unhappy about it either. Certainly, those are hands that I'm happy to clean out that equity. So it might be maybe even a protection raise.
Yeah, I mean, protection raises do make sense sometimes, but the downside would be if he would plan on continuing to barrel with those hands on later streets, which many players, myself included, certainly do. Sometimes it's very hard to play ace king from out of position, where you're just well, I don't really want to check and look weak and give my opponent the betting lead, so I'm just gonna keep betting and hope that they can't hold on with their random pairs.
Sure. So maybe I'm giving up some. If I were to protection raise here, I'd be giving up some free chips that I will get later from picking off bluffs. That's a good point. I mean, all in all, I think calling is fairly standard here. But if somebody told me they thin value raised, I guess I would look at them like they had three heads or something.
Yep. Totally makes sense. And I think it might be a mixed strategy where you do raise sometimes. Maybe on a board like this, you'd want the 8 of clubs just to have like additional equity. And, having the 8 of clubs doesn't really block many of his draws, and those draws are continuing anyway, so.
Yeah, all fair points. So, okay. Well, I do go ahead and call. So we are now at about 120 in the pot.
Oh, yeah, it's on the screen.
Oh, my God, look at that. And the turn now is the deuce of clubs.
Deuce of clubs.
So, of course, the flush draw comes in. We pair the bottom card. Not that should ever matter.
Nope.
Unless he has, like, ace deuce suited that he's getting frisky with, which could be. But you know what? He can have my money. So, yeah. So this is pretty interesting. And then the villain checks.
Okay.
What do you like here?
I mean, now I definitely like sort of betting for protection value. I think we can maybe get some calls from ace highs. Might be a little optimistic. I think it's probably correct to fold ace high here a lot of the time, without a club. But we do want to protect against, there's a lot more to protect against now. We can't be too scared of the villain having a flush here, given that he did 3-bet pre-flop. But at the same time, we actually do want to protect against like another club rolling off, which would just be a total disaster.
Yes.
And now we also have all those overcards that we don't want him to hit. And if he does call us with like random Broadway cards without clubs, we're very happy in the long run.
I mean, that's best case scenario. So, yeah, I think that's true, and I agree, and I agreed in game. What kind of sizing would you take here? Just kind of a smaller protection sizing, or do you think we could try to go after like some kind of club containing hand that might, like, some hand with the ace or king of clubs that might pay off a larger sizing?
I think we can still go small, because when we go small, we're still really, pricing out those draws, like, technically. They only have, like, 9 outs. They really don't, realistically, even if they have, like, 1 Broadway card or 2 Broadway cards, they don't have that much equity against us. Well, I guess if it's 2 Broadways plus a club, they do. So
yeah, I would say if they have if he has like ace king with a king of clubs, for example, and I bet 1/3, he absolutely has the direct odds to call.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, if he has ace king with the ace of clubs and you bet like full pot, I think he's just about priced, not quite priced in, but close. But I still think I like going small here. I also think that when this sort of flush completing card rolls off, this is definitely a time when people can play a little deceptively or play for pot control with overpairs, especially those without a club.
Sure.
This board is not that scary, but it's certainly something people could do. So I'm a little wary of bloating the pot as well. Just given the texture of the board.
That's a good point. That's true. He could be trapping here with the nut flush. 1 second, my computer is cord is being futzy.
No problem. Although, of course, I would think fewer flushes take this line. I don't know that he's necessarily going to be trapping, because this is like the dream for a flush. I would think it would be more like the sort of thin value hands that don't contain a club.
I agree. He probably is, barreling here. So at any rate, yeah, I go ahead and bet 40 into the 120. And this is where the hand gets wacky. Villain now check raises to 120.
Wow. So you bet 40, and he puts in a pretty small raise here.
Correct.
So this almost...
However, you have to consider given that stack sizes, the raise sizing isn't that strange. Because he's leaving himself with 160 behind. I think he either has to take a smaller sizing like this or jam. Those are kind of his options.
Yeah.
So I don't really think it's that weird that he's taken this sizing.
No, but I mean, it's kind of a weird spot where if he raises to 120, as you say, if you call, be 160 behind, but the pot would be like 360. You know, which is, and like even if you just jammed over the top right now, like you'd be getting excellent odds. So it's weird. It's kind of a weird spot. Like I guess his value hands here are most likely those sort of overpairs. You know, maybe an overpair with a club, and the bluffs are maybe the broadways with a club because you know they don't want to just call and like you know have to lead out on like a club river. You know, they want the betting lead. And they figure that you might just be stabbing after they check. So I don't know. I think it's a weird thing to do because I would think that sort of the thicker value hands would just either be betting, you know, relatively large on this river or on this turn or like, you know, check raising bigger.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I did think it was a little odd in game. I thought I just kind of had to call. I didn't really think there was any. I certainly think folding is. I mean, I don't know. Maybe against certain villains where they're just never bluffing here. But I don't know. I didn't think I wanted to fold getting this price.
Yeah, well, you know, I almost want to jam here.
Really? Okay.
Because I think if given the sizes that if we jam, we're just gonna get called by all the bluffs. Because like it's only going to be for like again 160 more into you know a pot of like 350, so I think he's just going to side call with all the Broadway you know cards with one club. I think if the river comes off a brick, we're probably gonna have to call anyway, and like but there's also the possibility that if the river comes a brick that they just shut down and check fold or you know river it goes check and we win with those bluffs. And I just don't see them doing this with an overpair that much. You know, it's like if you want to check on this board, it's typically for pot control.
Right. That's all fair points. I think that's interesting too, especially with the way our hand is. It may be hard sometimes to realize our equity on certain rivers. You know, if we just call and then the river is like another club, you know, or even a king or an ace, it could be, and he shoves it. You know, it gets hairy there.
Yeah, we really don't want to see like any Broadway card because like he certainly could be doing this with ace king, ace queen, ace jack, ace 10. Probably not 3-betting all those hands offsuit all the time, but again, you know, you did raise from the button, so it's possible that he does take those strong aces and raise for the most part. So that's what I'm thinking is, you know, now's kind of the time. I mean, I just feel like there's just so many rivers we don't want to see, and that even kind of includes bricks. Where like, you know, we're probably just gonna have to call on bricks anyway. So, you know, if we're gonna go broke on a brick, we may as well like, you know, I don't know, make them have it.
Right. I think that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're right. I think three betting here is probably the way to go.
It might be a little thin. I don't know. Maybe the villain does this enough with like overpairs with a club that's just, you know, not right.
I really didn't think in game that it made much sense for him to do this with an overpair, and I still think that it's very weird.
Yeah.
Because why would you do that? I mean, especially when the flush comes in, why would you want to be like, okay, I need to maximize the pot right now?
Right.
It's odd.
Right. It would be like you'd think they'd either be check calling or like taking a similar block sort of sizing.
Yeah, like maybe bet folding even.
Yeah.
But so. Anywho, I just call, but I agree that shoving here is good. And the river now is the 5 of spades, so double pairs the board.
And I would say that's basically a brick. I mean, obviously double pairing the board matters a lot in some circumstances. I would say not so much here.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't really seem like it would matter, just given that these are all low cards. Villain goes ahead and rips it in for 160, and, you know, I think I just got to close my eyes and call here.
Yep, I agree. I mean, again, I think at this point, like, you know, it's a less than half pot size jam, and that's again why I just prefer getting it in on the turn. But yeah, I agree. We just have to call.
Yep, we call, and we do win versus a hand I did not expect to see, which is ace of diamonds, queen of diamonds.
So ace queen suited with no clubs.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I'd have to, you know, that's great. Nice, good call. That is, I would say, one of those hands also that would not be calling a turn shove. So against his particular holding, you likely did get the maximum.
I agree. Yeah, but I really don't think that's a hand we would expect to see taken this way very much at all.
No, I think if we were constructing our ranges, check raising ranges on the turn, the bluffs would be more, probably have a lot more equity. We try and construct something like ace queen with a club.
Right. But hey, I was happy with it.
Well, cool. Nice hand. All right. Well, let's hop into a hand here. This is going to be from Rivers, Philadelphia, which we were playing. It's actually an 8-handed game, which is great. 8 max. I'm very happy with that. And the cap for this 1-3 game is 500. Which is nice. It's deep. One thing that I also liked about this 1-3 game is that it was not the smallest game at the casino, which I think is quite nice because at the Encore Boston where I usually play, it is like the 1-3 game is the smallest game, and I think that there are dynamics there where kind of run into a lot more people like short stacking. A lot more sort of the like OMC grinder types that are just like, whiling their time away, not really actually looking to play poker, but they want to just play for the cheapest they can, which is not great for the game in most scenarios. So it was a fun dynamic to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty unusual for rooms to run a spread of both 1-2 and 1-3, which I assume the other game was 1-2.
Yeah, so they did have, and they had probably 10 tables of 1-2 and like 5 tables or 6 tables of 1-3. And then the biggest game in the room was actually 2-5, which they probably had 5 tables as well going. So it was...
what was this, like a Friday or Saturday night?
Yeah, this was Friday night.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I will say... the Boston Billiards Club in Nashua, New Hampshire, does also run the spread, and as does the other room I've been to that has this is Thunder Valley Casino and Resort I believe it's in Rockland, California, which is where I used to live. I believe it's within the city limits, and that's it. Man, I don't know if any of you have ever been to that casino, but if you have, shout out to Thunder Valley. It's a nice, clean poker room. Got that really glaring white fluorescent light, though. It's not exactly not a comfortable place to play, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
All right.
So this is my first time in Rivers, and I did enjoy it. I mean, it was also reasonably clean, and like the poker room was nice. It was in like actually a fully non-smoking section of the casino, so which I appreciate, but not everybody does. But anyway, the straddle is going to be on in this hand, so we're playing 1-3-6. The person with the straddle on has been straddling quite often. They do the Mississippi straddle from any position, where action just starts immediately to the left of the straddle.
Not a fan.
Yeah, they've been button straddling, which I'm not a big fan of, but they've also been under the gun straddling, like in this instance. So, in some cases when a person's like straddling every hand, it kind of does go back around to kicking the action back up because everyone wants to attack that person's straddle.
Sure, yeah, that's fair. I guess my feeling on the game gets so, I feel like, out of whack with where you can straddle from anywhere. But yeah, fair enough.
So the second to act in this hand is also the low jack, given that it's 8-handed and there's a straddle on. He limps, and he's, I would say, a fairly weak player. Been playing very passive, doing a lot of limping, a lot of folding pre-flop. Good amount of calling as well pre-flop. Just like loves to limp.
I'm sorry. So wait, the straddle is under the gun, or it
is in this scenario, but this villain, it's just coincidence that he happens to be under the gun.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. That's good to know. And then I'm next to act, so I'm in the high jack, and I have Jack 10 of hearts. So I elect to raise it up to 25, which I'd say my standard open over a straddle is 20. So bump it up an extra 5 for the limp. And it folds around to the straddle, who calls, and the limper folds.
Okay. All right. So we're looking at
yes, and he has about, and I forgot to say this, he has about 350 left. So he started with around 375. He's the effective stack. So we're looking at about $60 in the pot after the blinds and the limp. 350 behind. I'm in the high jack, Jack 10 of hearts, heads up against the straddle.
Cool. And so he's an action player.
I would say he's an action player. He's given me action a number of times where he said donation and called and then wound up winning the pot with 10-7 offsuit,
Oh my god.
So which is great. I mean, I'm very happy to lose a pot with ace-king to 10-7 offsuit. from a player like this.
Sure. Well, that's like the Brad Owen hand on the Lodge a few weeks ago, where he lost a whatever many $100,000 pot to 10-7 with Ace King. So.
Yeah, exactly. So the flop is going to come out quite dry and favorable for my range for sure. It's going to come out King of Clubs, 9 of Diamonds, Deuce of Hearts. So King, 9, Deuce, Rainbow. There is 1 heart, so we've got a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw here.
Very nice.
And into the $60 pot, the villain is going to lead for 35.
Wow. Okay. That's like a chunky lead, I would say.
It's just over half pot. And I would say this table, I mean, this is where I really thought, like, wow, like, people here just have no idea what, about the theory of poker. Is I have watched multiple hands where the betting lead changed on every street. Like I saw a lot of like donk, get raised, donk again. Like, which is just like, it's just bizarre. Like, it's just not something you really should be seeing.
Yeah, I believe I feel like when I see that, a lot of times the player who keeps redonking has like bottom pair or something weird.
Yeah, and they just want to like buy more cards to improve. Yeah, so anyway, this particular player had definitely done it a decent amount, but other players were also participating in the donk wars. But he bets 35, and I mean, as we've discussed many times, donks that are kind of, especially ones that are not super hefty, which I would say this one, under 2/3 pot is not super hefty, are often like top pair with a weak kicker. And I think that, I mean, this board is just so dry and like so favorable for my range that like there are like plenty of value hands that I would be raising here. And so I'm also going to be raising some bluffs, and I think this is a great candidate for it. I've got a gut shot and backdoor flush draw.
Yeah, I do like it. I like the raise. I mean, I think you can call. I don't think there's anything wrong with calling and trying to improve. But I do like the raise with this specific holding. It's very easy to construct a turn barrel range, depending on what comes. You are blocking some of his stronger kings, like King Jack, and King 10. Not that those are particularly strong, but they're hands you may be less likely to fold to a raise than like King 3. Which he could certainly show up here with from the straddle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like the raise.
Well, what do you think about for sizing?
Well, so let's see. We got 350 behind. I think that we don't need to necessarily take a huge size. Because I think if we take a really big size, we're going to be forced to kind of rip it on turn. Which I don't necessarily want to do, like overbet, rip it on turn. Although maybe that's the strategy here, to put maximum pressure on his weak holdings. Like maybe if you go like, I don't know, 4x here and then just jam turn, maybe that's the best way to put max pressure. I mean, it's gonna be turn card dependent, of course, but naturally here you are extremely nut advantaged versus him. So I think that is a fair approach. I also think you can make it a click it like 2.5x maybe, and then try to run this for 3 street buffs or run a second street and then get away from it. I think either approach is fine. So I think like going a middle size like 3x would probably be a mistake.
Well, let me preface by saying that I forgot to say this at the beginning. I think I played this hand quite poorly throughout, and we'll get to more of it. But I do wind up going basically 3x. I raised to 100. And he does make the call, and that actually does. I mean, not that it's right, but it does wind up leaving about 260 in the pot, and him with about 250 behind. So. Oh,
okay. So I was mathing wrong. Well, then in that case, I actually like the size.
So now, yeah, because we each put 100 in, so now there's 260. And I was kind of thinking that, it's obviously hard to. That's definitely something I still struggle with, is doing those calculations on the fly of like figuring out how much is in someone's stack and actually like remembering like how much and. Doing all that, but I kind of like eyeballed it, and I did try and think about like what I was going for, and obviously my plan is definitely to be barreling on heart turns. Obviously if if a queen comes, we're gonna be barreling for sure, and probably aces also.
Yeah, I actually think I guess I wasn't doing the math on stack sizes wrong at first, but given this, like I actually do quite like the raise sizing. And I think you can rip it on most turns that aren't literally a king.
Sure.
because obviously he almost certainly will make trips. But I actually really just like ripping it quite liberally here. When you're playing a double barrel all in strategy, you don't really necessarily have the liberty of constructing your range. Like, okay, you pick if a heart comes, you pick up equity, sure, but like, it's not like you can then structure a triple barrel. You literally can't. So especially, and he's also donking out, like he's sort of telegraphing his hand. I kind of would be intending to rip it all in on most turns here.
Yeah, and I think that's totally reasonable. And I probably leveled myself a little bit as we moved to the turn, which came an offsuit 7. Let's call it the 7 of spades. So we are now double gutted. Obviously, it does improve some of his kings, but so do most cards. So no big deal on that. And he checks it over to me, and I probably agree that I like a jam here. I was probably thinking, if this was multi-way, I probably would check back here and try and realize my equity a good amount of the time. Like if I somehow raised a donk and like got cold called and then got called by another player, I'd probably plan on checking back a good amount. In the moment, I was kind of thinking, there's only a pot size bet left behind. Like I can plan on jamming rivers, but I don't really know if I can. It's like I don't really know what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, if he checks it over to you on the river, and you rip it, I mean, it's going to be river dependent. I would say, like, if the river is not a scary card, you might get looked up a little bit more. But honestly, I think that you're against this type of player, you're probably allowed to just jam rivers too. Like, I don't think this is atrocious. I probably would jam here, but I don't think it's atrocious not to just plan on jamming river instead.
Yeah, and we did pick up equity, which is like great, So it's like probably one of the better turn cards to be jamming on. Even if we did say we only want to jam on certain turn cards, it would probably be like 7s and hearts, and maybe even jacks and 10s and aces, right? Which this certainly qualifies as. So I think I agree that I'd prefer to just get it in now. But I decided to check back as played, and then as we move along to the river comes a very pretty offsuit queen.
Hey, we make some nuts.
So we make the nuts. It's worth noting the queen probably doesn't. I mean, the queen could help him. He could have king queen, but he checks it over to me for a third time. And what do you like doing here? Do you think we should be jamming?
Well, if we were planning to jam with our bluffs, we're probably supposed to jam with the value too. That's like balanced play. I mean, you could think exploitative wise, if you're really reading him as having a weak king, maybe we don't take a very large sizing, which I think is fine. You don't have to be balanced against a guy who's donking half pot on the flop. So, I could see if you don't really think he's going to call off a jam, throw 100 out there. I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree, because what I did wind up doing is I wound up jamming all in. But I think in retrospect, if we really read him for sort of having a king based on the flop bet, and honestly subsequent play, I think like the strongest hands are ruled out based on checking both turn and river and just calling the flop raise. So it's probably fair to narrow his range substantially, and maybe not all kings, like maybe he's got some like pocket 10s, pocket jacks, although obviously we block both of those. But yeah, I think if we think that, then we definitely should go small. Because in the moment, I was thinking exactly what you said. Like, wow, I was planning on jamming rivers on a brick, so I should probably jam it now that I've made my hand. But like, as you said, against a player like that, you probably can just say, hey, like, I am going to jam when I miss and bet smaller when I hit, because like I know he has a king.
Right. Exactly. I mean, exactly. It's like he's playing his hand face up. So
right, which is not a good play, and like against most opponents. Don't misinterpret this, all you listeners. And go altering your bet sizings based on hand strength against competent and strategic players.
Yeah. I mean, I think I will. We've talked about this before, but I do tend to default to trying and failing to play a balanced strategy. But I do think this is, and look, it can't be that bad to jam here, obviously. But yeah, I do think exploitatively against this sort of player type and this action, you can just try to get paid off by king, bet $100. So.
Yeah, so I wind up jamming because I kind of think, well, he might just look me up anyway, because I definitely did have a pretty aggressive image at this table, and he basically said, oh man, I have a king and mucked. So, which is like, and then I was like, oh, of course he had a king. I knew you had a king. I was just hoping you would look up my jam anyway.
Yeah.
And he did not. So I feel like that was a hand that afterwards I was like, wow, it really feels like I could have played multiple streets a little bit better, just, whether it's ripping it on the turn or once I check back turn and hit, betting smaller, is almost certainly actually like what I'm supposed to be doing exploitatively in that moment to maximize profit.
Yeah. All right. Well, what are you going to do? You made something. At least you won the hand, right?
Yeah. Well, it would have been hard not to with that run out.
Yeah, with the nuts. Okay. Well, I've got a hand here from that fun 2-2 session, which I will say this hand, as I was in it, I was like, I think this hand could have been a lot more interesting than it ended up being. It's sort of like, I sort of was like kind of lame the way it turned out, but I want to imagine the counterfactual here on one of the streets, because I do think that there could have been a pretty interesting decision which did not come to pass.
Oh, well, I think that's fair, and I think we bring those up plenty, where we say, well, what if he jams here, or what if multiple players call and you have to take this later? So totally fine with that. And this is Best Bet Orange Park.
This is Best Bet Orange Park. This is a 2-2 200 cap game. We have it's my two buddies whose poker prowess is truly a sight to behold in terms of donkishness, and also some other gentlemen who are trying to compete with them for a questionable play. We did have a guy, an older gentleman, going all in with all sorts of garbage. I think he was rebuying once every 2 orbits on average. We had a guy who was betting full pot on every street with every holding, so it was just good times.
Sounds like a profitable table for you.
It was a fun table. So at any rate, this hand is going to be a very shallow stacked hand, as they often are at these stakes. I am sitting with 190 in the cutoff. There's 2 villains in the hand. One of them covers me. The other one I cover. He has 105. This is the big blind who has 105. And so he's about 52 big blind, whatever.
Yep.
And this is a 7-handed game. Someone is up having a cigarette. So we're going to start with a hijack limp. The hijack is the person who covers me. He's a very straightforward player. He had been running red hot all night. He'd been making boats and boats and boats. So he's having a great time.
And he limps here.
He limps.
Okay.
And I'm next to act, of course, with Ace of Diamonds, King of Clubs. So I'm going to be raising this hand. I make it to $12, with standard open being 10 plus 2 for the limp.
Yep.
And the big blind cold calls my raise, and the limper calls as well.
Okay. All sounds very standard for this type of game.
Yep. Exactly.
So like 36, 38 in the pot, and you'll take off $12 from each of you. Cool. So I think nothing really to report here on this pre-flop action.
Yep, fairly standard stuff. The flop is Ace of Hearts, 9 of Diamonds, 7 of Clubs. So quite dry.
And we flop top.
We have top, so can't complain. It checks over to me, and I go ahead and make it $15. I guess I could have gone 12 again, but I hate making dealers make change. I already felt bad about betting 12 pre-flop, so I just bet 15.
I will say it is nice at some casinos where and I think Best Bet is one of them, where they have the $2 chip, which I think does help a lot with that sort of altering your sizing.
Yeah, I do. I didn't have any in my stack, so I was just like, I'm just gonna bet 15 here.
Yeah, which I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to put some money in here with top.
Yeah, I think checking here is atrocious. So I also think it's multi-way. I should be betting small. I could probably in an unbalanced way size up, just because I'm probably going to get action from the same set of hands anyway. But given how shallow the big blind is, it doesn't super matter.
Yep.
And speaking of the big blind, he min clicks it literally up to $30.
Wow.
Yep. Which the hijack pretty quickly cold calls.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
This is some live low stakes action.
It is.
So I actually think we have a pretty interesting decision here. I think we have the best hand a lot. I also think we are beat sometimes here by either player. I will say, I mean, you would say, well, the hijack, would he not be raising, maybe, 3-betting here with 9s or 7s, but this player, he's been running hot as heck, and I have seen him raise his strong hands almost never. He's the slow play king. So he could definitely have 9s or 7s here.
And, I mean, to be fair, I actually don't hate calling with 9s or 7s either, because as you mentioned, the board is quite dry. There are not a ton of draws out there, and,
Sure.
He does want you to call, and
Absolutely.
keep another player in. It's like if he raises, then one of you is probably going to fold. Whereas here, I mean, you're obviously going to at least call in this scenario.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think I can have the worst of it here, but I also can absolutely be smashing both of them. So I don't know. What do you think? Do we call here? Do we raise? If we do raise, how much should we raise?
Oh, it's really interesting because it's so short. I almost just want to rip it, but that might, or just put in enough to cover the big blind.
Right. That's more what I was considering is should I make it 100?
Yeah, but then we only have $80 left, and if the if the hijack does decide to come back over the top, we pretty much, I mean, I don't know that we can ever really fold.
Yeah, it's really awkward with stack sizes. I mean, maybe I don't have to make it 100. Maybe I should make it. God, I don't know. The stack sizes are so awkward. I mean, it's probably just rip it or call. Those are probably really the only.
And now that we're thinking about the stack sizes, I probably am okay just calling, because it is, if we call, there's going to be 130 in the pot, and the big blind's going to have 150 left. Or no, we're going to have 150 left as the deeper of the two. So, right. Then we shouldn't have any trouble getting the money in if we want to. And I just don't think there are that many scare cards, just because of how, maybe someone has Jack 10, maybe someone has 10-8 suited, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but there aren't that many, open-enders, there's no flush draws, so, the only thing we really need to be worried about is either someone already having a set, or someone just, drilling a random 2-pair, right? If someone's got, if they both have, worse aces, then obviously we don't want to see that card pair.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think jamming here, I don't know. I think it's tough because of the terrible price he'd be getting, I kind of think it's tough for hijack to call us with worse.
Well, but the big blind will probably also call.
Right.
Which does give him a better price.
It does. It's true. Yeah. It's interesting. It is really interesting. So what if we jam here? We make it basically 180, and then big blind let's say if big blind calls, right? Then that makes it that's 270 plus what was already in there, which is about 35. So we're that's 305 plus the other guy's call, so that's 335. So he has to call
150.
I don't know, 150 to win. He's getting a little better than 2-1. Yeah, actually, that's the right odds to call with an open ender. There's no flush draw, but that is the right odds to call with specifically an open ender, I guess.
But of course, we might fold out things like his aces, which
would suck.
Right, we really don't want to do that. So I think, given how shallow the stacks are, I'm probably okay just calling and trying to navigate future streets. Because again, I mean, when we're this short, if we're playing ace king against a set, sucks to be us.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So, yeah, I just call. That is what I do in game. So
okay. Cool. So big blind has about a half pot size bet, and we've got just over a pot size bet remaining.
Correct.
Okay.
And the turn now is the 10 of hearts, which I guess completes Jack 8 and 8-6, but hopefully no one has those hands.
6-8 is maybe more likely, given that it's an open ender. I mean, not that, but I also don't know how often people are calling with 6-8 before the flop. It really depends on the table.
I think with this particular, the hijack can have 6-8 here, given how he has been playing all night.
Okay.
he's been limp calling a lot with like suited gappers. So, yeah, I do think it is possible that someone has made a straight here, albeit unlikely. The big blind now goes all in for 63, and the hijack is tanking. And while the hijack's tanking, I'm like, what am I gonna do if he calls or jams? And this is, spoiler alert, he didn't, but he ended up folding. But this, I do actually think this is an interesting question. Like, if he rips it? Am I supposed to fold?
I think so. Like, I think that line is just super strong from him of, like, call the raise, cold call the flop raise, with you still to act as the initial aggressor, and then call or jam here, like, still knowing that you are behind as well. Like, I think, especially if he's kind of been slow playing all his strong hands to this point, then, like, that would probably be, like alarm bells. Like, I don't know if have you seen him, like, bluff?
No. He actually has talked a lot about how he doesn't bluff.
Which you never know, because some people, I've definitely met people who kind of use that to their advantage.
Sure.
But
I haven't seen him show down anything but the nuts.
So I think if he jams, then I do think we just kind of have to kiss our ace-king goodbye.
If he just calls, do you think the same?
I think so. Because, like, that's pretty much the same, it sounds like, from him. Like, again, it's just so strong to, like, call in multi-way pots when you're, like, in the middle.
Yeah.
So I do think we just have to, like, be sad and fold.
I think you're probably right. And I was thinking in game, like, man, this would be so brutal to have to lay this down. And I don't know what I really would have done. I think if he jammed, I would have found a fold pretty easily. If he called, I might have been more tempted to, like, call and see. But you're probably right. I probably should be folding in that situation.
Yeah, and then we call and see, and there's, 140 in the pot, and we have $80 behind, and,
Right.
It's
well, there's a lot more than 140 at that point, but yeah.
Yeah.
There's, like, 200 something. So,
yeah.
No, I think you're right. Like,
you're right, 250.
It's the same thing. Like, we just have to lay it down pretty much regardless. So, but thankfully he lets it go.
And now we have an easy. Now we have an easy call.
Cut it off. Big blind has ace queen.
Oh.
0. So, yeah, which I think fairly standard from him. I'm surprised. I mean, he should have 3-bet pre. He should have jammed on the flop probably. But whatever. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean that, I think nice hand. I think, yeah, if the cutoff jams or calls, because it's also a spot or if the hijack, it's also a spot where it's like he should just like never be bluffing because it's like a dry side pot situation,
sure.
Where like it doesn't make sense for him to jam as a bluff because the big blind is basically representing a strong ace at worst.
Right.
And so what does he have to gain by, like, jamming for, a small amount on top of the large pot that he can't bluff the big blind off of?
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think a jam is a pretty clear-cut fold to a jam. I think the call is maybe a bit more interesting, but still very likely a fold. And he did actually tell me later he had 10-8 suited. So
he made the 10 and then basically decided no good. Yeah.
Yeah, which is astute from him. So.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that is a couple interesting decision points there of thinking about how to play the hand.
Yeah. All right. So final hand for us.
Yeah, final hand, and this is back at the Encore Boston Harbor 1-3 game. So this is from earlier in the week. Let's grab it real quick. We are playing, I believe, 9-handed in this game. So we're playing full ring. And I'll just quickly update this. But I'd say this table was pretty good as far as like these 1-3 tables go. There are quite a few people who are sort of more standard. There was this awesome like crazy older gentleman that was really like using his image very well. Where most people see this kind of like 70-something man who doesn't speak a ton of English. And they're like, oh, well, every time he raises, he has the nuts. And I watched him just run this, like, baller 3-bet bluff with, like, bottom pair and a flush draw. Where he, like, bet, like, 300 on the river, which is, like, a large... if you see anyone over the age of 70 bet 300 at any point, you should probably fold. But like he just showed 7 deuce for like a flush, a busted flush draw in bottom pair when he was called, and I was like, wow, like this guy is awesome.
That's fantastic. I have played against a few older gentlemen who know how to kick it with the young cats, and I've definitely seen it happen, and it is pretty fun. Actually, at Encore, I and that one time I played with you there was that older gentleman across the table running some sick bluffs. I don't know if you recall that.
Yeah, I do, and I think I played with him since then too. So it's cool to I like seeing that sort of thing. Yeah. And anyway, he's not involved in this hand, but just to give some context on the
table.
On the table. So in this particular hand, I'm in the big blind. We're about 550 effective. There's no straddle, so we're playing quite deep. Just under 200 big blinds. And a middle position player limps. The low jack limps. The cutoff limps. The button limps. And the small blind limps. So that's 5 total limps. And I look down at ace of diamonds, jack of clubs.
Very nice.
And I decide that the price of poker will go up.
I like it.
And so I make it 30 over 5 limps. Which
seems appropriate.
Yeah. And
lay down the hammer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like, I've... And by the way, I've done this before and gotten all 5 people to call, which 100%. Is... Yeah, which is quite a fun time. I've done this with
much worse hands than ace jack offsuit, so I think this is great. So
yeah, exactly. So the middle position, who was the first limper, calls, and now fears are just rushing through my head of now that he's called, everyone else is priced in.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come to that. Only the button calls as well.
Nice. So 3 ways, $100 pot.
Yep, we got basically $100 in there. And the flop comes out 4 of diamonds, 4 of hearts, deuce of spades.
Wow, great flop for your hand.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like it's as far as flops go, it's not bad. There are obviously a ton of misses in my opponent's range.
You could literally have the best hand here a lot, actually. So
you're right, exactly. Like I could definitely have the best hand, and I think I actually, because as I was writing this hand down, something didn't make sense, and I believe I did a live misclick here where I thought I had raised smaller before the flop. So I bet 20 into 100, which is small. I would probably have bet 25 or 30 had I kind of known what the pot size was.
That's okay. You can be forgiven for a live misclick once in a while.
Yeah. What do you? I mean, I assume you also like betting here in a reasonably small amount.
Oh yeah. You can't check this board. I mean, I don't know. Like, there are some, like, if it goes check for 3 streets, yeah, you probably win. But I mean, it's just going to be really annoying to have to defend here, especially multi-way. If you end up in the middle of 2 people. I just want to bet here and, see if we can just take the pot down. And we can get called by worse here.
And neither of those happen, as the middle position limp caller raises to 65 and the button folds.
All right. So you don't think you need to fold here, it sounds like. Otherwise we wouldn't be talking about this.
Well, so there are a couple things I'm thinking. Kind of a couple things going through my head. I think this actually ties back nicely to to your first hand, where his raising range here is just exclusively like 5s through 8s, let's say.
Sure. Or like, a 4.
Or a 4, but I don't think, I think people aren't really raising 4s that much. Like, I think a lot of people just don't raise trips on the flop. So I kind of am thinking, so I'm thinking a couple things. First of all, I think that, if overcards roll off, I can, probably steal the pot. Like, this guy has been playing quite tight, especially post-flop, where he's definitely more of a standard, tight passive player where if there's significant action and there's scare cards that come off, he's happy to fold and doesn't really want to fight for these pots. The other thing is this is a tiny raise because of, all the pre-flop action, where I need to call 45 to win 185. So I'm basically getting, I'm basically getting 4 to 1.
Right. Which, you don't have quite enough outs from a direct odds standpoint to call here, but you do probably have I mean, if you're going to be taking it down nefariously, then I think this is also fine.
Well, and if I assume like I see 2 more cards, then I think I do have the direct odds, right? I have 6 outs. It's basically 25% equity, which is more than the 20% that I need to make this call. Obviously, if he does have a 4, that does change it.
What? Yeah. Okay.
Right, because I need to call 45 to win a total of 230.
Yeah, but I agree with you that he probably doesn't have a 4, especially not given the size he's taking here. And
and that's also part of it. Is just kind of a combo where I bet small and then he raised small, and it just felt like there aren't really any draws on this board where he's doing this with like a flush draw. Maybe he's got ace 3, ace 5 occasionally, but I
you're beating those hands. So.
Right, I'm beating those hands, and so it just felt like his range was so condensed. It is a little awkward because I'm not necessarily gonna see like both cards, right? Like if the turn rolls off another low card and he bets, then I probably have to fold.
Yeah, I don't really think calling here and just trying to improve is very good. I do think though that if you're intending to run a bluff on a later street, this is probably fine. In terms of like the bluffing properties of your hand, I think that it's not amazing. I think I would rather not have an ace.
Yeah.
Because I want him to have ace 3 and ace 5, whereas we're blocking those. Although if this player is very ABC, he might not even be doing such things with ace 3 and ace 5. But
yeah, I mean, why would you raise with ace high?
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, why do my draws never hit?
Right. Yes.
So anyway, there's about 230 in the pot, and we've got, looks like 455 left. And the turn is not my favorite card in the world, but it's actually, I guess it is actually up there. It's the 10 of clubs. So it completes the rainbow, and it is an overcard to, I would say, if he is doing it with a pocket pair, probably all of them. He is probably raising pocket 10s, even though he is relatively tight, he does raise occasionally. I know he plays some amount of 2-5 also.
So he's probably not playing 10s for a limp call.
Right. And what do you think about a lead here? To plan on, jamming river, basically.
A lead. That's interesting. Well, you are... I guess you're leading to represent a 10 because you're saying that a 10, that's something that you're thinking he will check back because this is bad for his range. I don't know. It's really hard to like... if he was a competent player, he's just going to call this lead,
Which I think is fine, but if I then, if he's got one of these hands between 5s and 9s, can he call this? If he calls this lead, I'm probably fine with that because I'm going to be just like jamming most rivers, which is what I'm thinking. I'm kind of thinking about, if I lead, I don't expect to really get raised ever here, and if I do, I think I can fold. I can definitely fold comfortably.
Sure. Versus I guess if you don't lead, you're expecting he'll check this back.
Yeah, I think so. And then if he checks it back and then I lead river, am I more likely to get called on like a brick river versus getting called here and then getting a fold on the river, which I think he is almost, if the action went lead call and like definitely if an overcard rolls off, but let's say a 3 rolls off on the river, I'm probably getting folds from like pocket 7s with like a pot-sized jam.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't know that the story of like lead and then jam river is credible. Like, what are you really representing with that line?
Well, do you think I could ever do that with like over pairs?
No. Not really. I can't. That you c-bet, call, and then lead. Maybe. Yeah, I think it is possible. I don't know that like even in his seat that I would think of that you would do that in game. Like I do think it is plausible that you might take an overpair in this manner. I don't actually think that you would very often though. I don't know. I don't think it's a very credible story. If he's really bad, it might not matter if it's a credible story, but I don't know that I like a lead here. I might just like I mean, check. If it goes check. It's also not very credible to jam river. Like, it's hard. Like, you probably just have to take a larger river sizing, like a 2/3 type of sizing, to try to induce a fold, because it's not very credible to jam. I don't know. This is a tricky one, Josh.
It's just interesting. I mean, do you think an overpair would ever be like 3-betting the flop? Like, do you think I should be 3-betting the flop with like overpairs?
No, I don't. I don't. I just don't know if finding the lead, how likely it is that you'd find a lead in game with this card. I do think it would be good. I think playing overpair as a check call lead is good. I just don't know how often if it happens often enough that he's gonna like think of that.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, I'm gonna be leading the crap out of overpairs against you next time we play.
All right, fair enough.
Now that I know, no, I'm I think it all makes sense. I think I could probably go either way here with this hand. Yeah. The other thing that I'm thinking about in retrospect is, if I lead, I also avoid the possibility. I avoid the possibility of like checking and facing like a $60 bet or something, like where he just like down bets for protection.
Check jamming here is also really weird. I don't know. This is why it sucks to float out of position.
That's true.
Like, floating out of position sucks. And you maybe just shouldn't do it.
Yeah, but if I'm going to, then I probably need to.
Folded the flop, Josh. Have you considered this?
That's fair. But I think at this, if I'm going to float out of position, I probably should incorporate some leads, especially when as an exploit when someone's range is sort of narrowed down.
I think the most credible line you can take, or not the most credible, but the most likely to work line you can take is, you're right, probably a lead, a bet call lead jam river. Yeah. So I like a lead here at the end of the day, I guess, but I don't love the situation.
Well, anyway, the river is about probably one of the best cards, probably the best card that can.
What happens?
Oh, sorry, he checks back. I check and he checks back.
Oh, turn goes check.
It goes check. So everything works out fine. Sorry, I forgot we hadn't actually said that. But yes, I eventually like to check and he checks it back pretty quickly. So I don't think he likes this 10. Is sort of my, kind of helping to confirm my earlier thoughts. And now that we've gone through the turn action, the river is probably the best card without pairing my hand, which is the king of clubs. Because if I'm gonna play floats like this, like ace king is probably like one that I can actually do more often. Well,
yeah, I actually think this is a great card for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think as played, I think this is like a must bet here. Now that like this is just a great run out if I floated flop out of position with malicious intent. This is like the great payoff to that malicious intent. Yeah,
absolutely. I think you should take maybe a 150, somewhere between 150 and 180, like 2/3 to 3/4 spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I bet I agree. I just go 175. Like, I think I just bet big here. Like, there's just no way he's gonna call me. Like, I just have so many kings. Obviously, like I said, this is just like the best river card that could come other than an ace or a jack, because kind of make, as played especially, obviously, if I donk turn and he calls and then like this card comes out on the river, it's like even better.
Sure.
But, as played, still I agree, a great opportunity. I bet 175. He kind of hems and haws, counts out some chips. But I suspect he probably had no plans of calling, as he did fold pocket nines face up.
Wow. Very nice.
So
this is a pot. I think this is one of those, people talk about winning more than your fair share of pots. You definitely were not supposed to win this pot, and you did. So well played. I don't think I would. I think I would have just folded flop personally, and maybe that would have been, a mistake.
I don't think it can possibly be a mistake to fold ace high with no draws to a flop raise.
Perhaps not, but perhaps missing out on some opportunity here. I mean, this was very well played. So an unusually well played hand, I suppose.
Well, we did just go through the other hand where I failed to get max value and failed to bluff when I was behind. That's we have to mix it up and throw in an actual exploitative hand once in a while.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, cool.
All right. that was awesome with our visuals. If you're listening on Spotify, man, did you miss out on a show?
There is video on our Spotify too, by the way.
No.
So
wow. So never mind. But I mean, well, yeah, if you're just listening, I mean, if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, what are you doing? So
yeah, we went to this video for a reason. We added all this for a reason. Looking at it, I think the next thing to do is add a little action tracker. So, because we're just kind of spouting off numbers and then updating the pot numbers, and you're probably like, what just happened? Why did somebody min raise and then cold call?
That's true. Yeah, we could make it even more sophisticated if we wanted to. That's us. We're a couple of sophisticated poker players.
Quite.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for wasting another hour with us. We really appreciate it. As always, you should hit that like button. You should subscribe to the channel, and you should comment how we could have played these hands better. You should tell us insights like fold pre. That's really helpful.
Fold flop.
Fold flop. Fold pre.
Fold turn.
Fold turn. Really? Anything that you can tell us, we really appreciate. So, with that, have a good night.
Thanks for listening.